What if the giants of ancient myth weren't just legends? Across the faded pages of history, whispers persist of a race both terrifying and enigmatic. A race the Bible calls the Nephilim. Born from the forbidden union of the sons of God and the daughters of men, their story has haunted the imagination for millennia. Most scholars dismiss these tales as myth, lost in the shadows of time, but what if the truth is more unsettling than fiction? Could these ancient giants have really walked the earth? And if so, what became of them? Today we delve into the real story behind the Nephilim. We'll sift through ancient texts, unravel cryptic clues, and confront the mysteries that still echo in our world today. Prepare to step into a realm where myth and reality collide, and where the secrets of the past may hold warnings for our future. But first, welcome to the channel where we expose ancient truths, challenge mainstream narratives, and dig deep into the mysteries they don't want you to question. If you like what you see here, click that big, beautiful red subscribe button, and if you're feeling generous, you can tap that bell too for instant notice whenever I post a new video. Today we're covering the Nephilim, who they were, where they came from, and why their legacy still casts a shadow over human history. Let's dig in. The story of the Nephilim begins with one of the most puzzling passages in the entire Bible. Found in Genesis chapter 6 verses 1 through 4, these few verses have sparked centuries of debate and fascination. The text describes a time when humanity was multiplying on the earth, and a group called the Sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful. They took them as wives, and from these unions, offspring were born. The Bible states, the Nephilim were on the earth in those days, and also afterward, when the sons of God went in to the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. They were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. This brief account opens a door to a world that feels both ancient and profoundly strange, leaving us with far more questions than answers. Who exactly were these sons of God, and what does the name Nephilim truly mean? The Hebrew word itself is debated. It might come from the root, meaning to fall, leading some to translate it as the fallen ones. Others suggest it implies causing others to fall, framing the Nephilim as tyrants or mighty warriors who impose their will on others. The text doesn't give us a clear definition, instead plunging us directly into the mystery. This ambiguity is the very reason the Nephilim have captured the human imagination for so long. The passage acts as a dark prelude to the Great Flood, suggesting a world so corrupted and chaotic that divine intervention became necessary. Were these beings human, supernatural, or something in between? The phrase, mighty men who were of old, the men of renown, could point toward legendary heroes, kings or warriors whose great deeds were passed down through oral tradition. Yet the context feels ominous. The events described are directly linked to God's observation that the wickedness of man was great in the earth. This connection implies that the arrival of the Nephilim was not a celebrated event, but a transgression that pushed the world toward a cataclysmic judgment. This brief but powerful narrative sets the stage for a deep dive into the ancient worldview. It challenges modern readers to think beyond familiar categories and consider a world where the boundaries between the divine and the human were not as clearly defined as we might assume today. It hints at a cosmic conflict, a rebellion that played out not just in the heavens but on the earth itself, with humanity caught in the middle. The Genesis account is merely the starting point of a thread that runs through ancient texts, folklore, and even modern speculation, a puzzle box that scholars and theologians have been trying to unlock for millennia. The most ancient and influential interpretation identifies the sons of God as divine beings, specifically angels who transgressed their heavenly station. This view, widely held in Second Temple Judaism, posits that a group of rebellious angels descended to earth, took human wives and fathered a hybrid race, the Nephilim. These offspring were not merely strong humans, but were beings of immense power and unnatural origin, giants who filled the world with violence and chaos. The Book of 1 Enoch, an important text for understanding this period, elaborates on this story in great detail. It names the angelic leaders of this rebellion and describes how they taught humanity forbidden arts like sorcery, warfare, and metallurgy, leading to widespread corruption that ultimately provoked the flood. This interpretation sees the Genesis 6 story as a cosmic rebellion, a direct assault on God's created order. By mixing divine and human natures, these fallen angels introduced a corrupting element into the human bloodline. The Nephilim, their offspring, were therefore seen as an abomination, as unnatural beings who had no place in God's creation. This understanding adds a profound layer of meaning to the flood narrative. It wasn't just about human sin, it was about a supernatural crisis that threatened to permanently defile the earth and humanity itself. The flood, from this perspective, was a necessary act of divine surgery to remove a cancerous growth that could not be healed, preserving a pure human lineage through Noah and his family. Evidence for this angelic view is not limited to extra-biblical texts like 1 Enoch. Some scholars see echoes of this tradition within the New Testament itself. Passages in 2 Peter chapter 2 verse 4 and Jude verse 6 speak of angels who did not keep their own domain, but abandoned their proper abode, and are now held in eternal bonds in deepest darkness, awaiting judgment. These verses are often linked to the Genesis 6 account, suggesting that the early Christian writers were familiar with and likely accepted the interpretation of a fall among angelic beings. This perspective also finds parallels in other ancient Near Eastern mythologies like the Mesopotamian Apkallu, divine sages who interacted with humanity before a great flood, blurring the lines between the divine and mortal realms. This interpretation paints a dramatic picture of the pre-flood world, one filled with supernatural conflict and beings of immense power. The Nephilim were not heroes to be emulated but terrifying symbols of cosmic disorder. They represented a profound violation of the created boundaries established by God. The boundary between heaven and earth, divine and human. Their existence was a sign that the world had descended into a state of irredeemable chaos, where forbidden knowledge and unnatural unions had corrupted the very fabric of reality. This view portrays the flood as a desperate but necessary measure to restore order and protect creation from a supernatural threat that originated from beyond the human sphere. But not all interpretations look to the heavens for an explanation. A prominent alternative, known as the Sethite view, argues that the entire drama of Genesis 6 is a human one. In this reading, the sons of God are not angels, but are identified as the righteous descendants of Seth, Adam, and Eve's third son. The daughters of men, in turn, are seen as the ungodly descendants of Cain, the first murderer. The story, therefore, is not about a supernatural transgression, but a social and spiritual one. It describes the breakdown of the faithful community through intermarriage with a corrupt and violent culture, a failure to remain separate and holy, as God intended for the righteous line. This perspective reframes the narrative as an earthly tragedy, the blurring of moral lines between the godly and the ungodly. The Nephilim in this context are the offspring of these mixed unions, not semi-divine giants but powerful human rulers, warriors, or tyrants who inherited the spiritual corruption of their parents. Their renown would have been for earthly power, conquest, and arrogance, not for supernatural abilities. This view grounds the story firmly in human history, making it a cautionary tale about the dangers of assimilation and the loss of spiritual identity, a theme that resonates throughout the rest of the Old Testament. Another interpretation takes a more symbolic approach, suggesting the story is less about specific genetics and more about universal themes of order and chaos. In this view, the narrative serves as a powerful myth to explain the origin of evil and the justification for the destructive flood. The union of the sons of God and daughters of men represents a violation of sacred boundaries, a collapse of the divinely established social and cosmic order. The Nephilim are the literal embodiment of this chaos, figures of disorder whose presence signifies that the world has become fundamentally broken. The story is a polemic against the pagan myths of the surrounding cultures, which often celebrated heroes born from unions between gods and humans. The Sethite and symbolic interpretations offer a way to understand the Nephilim without resorting to supernatural beings. They place the responsibility for the world's corruption squarely on human shoulders, focusing on themes of moral decay, social breakdown, and the importance of maintaining a covenant relationship with God. While perhaps less dramatic than the angelic view, these interpretations offer their own profound insights. They transform the story from a bizarre supernatural event into a timeless allegory about the human condition, warning every generation about the consequences of abandoning righteousness and blurring the lines between the sacred and the profane, a message with enduring relevance. The mystery of the Nephilim really deepens with a single, perplexing phrase in Genesis chapter 6 verse 4, which says they were on the earth in those days, and also afterward. This suggests their presence continued even after the Great Flood, which was supposed to cleanse the earth of corruption. Interestingly, this idea is seemingly confirmed much later in the Book of Numbers. When the Israelite spies return from scouting the land of Canaan, they give a terrifying report to Moses. They claim the land is inhabited by giants, stating, "And there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak who come from the Nephilim, and we seemed to ourselves like grasshoppers, and so we seemed to them." This report throws a wrench into the narrative and raises a critical question. How could the Nephilim have survived a global flood that, according to the Genesis account, only Noah and his family survived? One explanation within the angelic view is that the same sin was repeated after the flood, that another group of angels descended and created a new generation of giants. Another possibility is that the genetic trait was somehow passed down through one of Noah's daughters-in-law. It's also possible that the spies were simply exaggerating, using the legendary name Nephilim to describe the fearsome tall people they encountered and to justify their own cowardice. However, it's worth noting that the Bible does describe other giant clans in Canaan and surrounding regions, lending credibility to the spies' report of encountering unusually large people. The Rephaim are mentioned in several chapters, a people associated with King Og of Bashan, whose iron bed was said to be over 13 feet long. It also names the Anakim, the sons of Anak mentioned by the spies, the Amim, and the Zuzim, as tall and powerful peoples who had to be driven out of the Promised Land. Whether these groups were biologically related to the pre-flood Nephilim or were simply called by that name due to their impressive stature, remains a subject of, well, intense debate among scholars. Ultimately, the post-flood Nephilim reference serves to heighten the drama of the Israelite conquest of Canaan. It frames the conflict not just as a military campaign but as a spiritual one. The Israelites were not merely fighting other nations, they were confronting the lingering echoes of the ancient corruption that had once brought the world to ruin. By defeating these giants, they were completing the work of the flood, cleansing the land of its chaotic and unholy inhabitants to establish God's kingdom on earth. Whether these giants were literal descendants of the original Nephilim or simply formidable human warriors, their presence represented a final, formidable obstacle to fulfilling the divine promise. The story of the Nephilim has, honestly, cast a long shadow, influencing religious thought, folklore, and popular culture for thousands of years. Its mystery has proven to be incredibly fertile ground for the human imagination. In the ancient world, it provided a framework for understanding evil, cosmic rebellion, and the ongoing struggle between divine order and earthly chaos. The narrative resonated deeply, shaping how early Jewish and Christian communities viewed the spiritual world and the nature of sin. The idea of fallen angels and their monstrous offspring became a powerful symbol of transgression, a story that explained why the world was such a violent and broken place, offering a backstory to the spiritual warfare described throughout the scriptures. In modern times, the Nephilim have become the subject of renewed speculation. Controversial discoveries like alleged giant human bones and the enigmatic Nazca mummies have reopened the question, were these beings physical, not just mythological? While mainstream science firmly dismisses such findings as hoaxes or misinterpretations, not all researchers agree. And when it comes to offering clear alternative explanations, mainstream institutions often fall silent. Others have connected the Nephilim to ancient astronaut theories, suggesting the sons of God were not angels but extraterrestrial visitors who genetically engineered or interbred with early humans. These modern interpretations, while popular in certain circles, strip the story of its theological depth and transform it into a tale of UFOs and alien encounters. The debate over the Nephilim's identity continues within theological and academic circles, with no single interpretation achieving universal consensus. Each view, angelic hybrid, human tyrant, or symbolic figure, offers a different lens through which to understand the complex message of Genesis chapter 6. The persistence of this debate highlights the rich ambiguity of the biblical text itself. The story's brevity and lack of detail seem almost intentional, inviting every generation to wrestle with its meaning. It forces us to confront difficult questions about the nature of God, the boundaries of creation, and the origin of evil, ensuring its relevance endures far beyond its ancient origins. Ultimately, the Nephilim remain one of the Bible's most profound and lasting enigmas. They are a haunting echo from a lost world, figures of immense power and renown whose true nature is shrouded in mystery. Whether they were fallen angels, human despots, or mythological symbols, their story serves as a potent reminder of a world spiraling into chaos and the divine judgment that followed. The unanswered questions surrounding them ensure that they will continue to fascinate, provoke, and inspire debate, standing as a timeless testament to the power of a story that refuses to be neatly explained or easily forgotten, forever dwelling in the space between heaven and earth. Thanks for watching. If you want more deep dives into ancient mysteries and biblical oddities, don't forget to like and subscribe.